This segment of the Chopin podcast is brought to you by the Chopin Foundation of the United States, presenters of the National Chopin Competition in Miami, Florida, January 2025. Chopin's Impromptus, while lighter fare than the ballades or scherzos, contain some of Chopin's most popular music for both recording artists and listeners alike. With this in mind, I can think of no one better to recommend some great recordings of the Impromptus than Jed Distler, who is a prolific listener, an accomplished pianist in his own right, and, speaking of Impromptus, quite the effortless improviser. Jed has listened to untold thousands of piano recordings in his life and written about many of them for Gramophone magazine and ClassicsToday.com. He is the host of WWFM's weekly radio show Between the Keys, and in 2021, he was the official Gramophone blogger of the International Chopin Competition in Warsaw. At the end of each episode of the Chopin podcast, Jed will share his thoughts on an exceptional recorded cycle of the given genre, as well as a memorable recording of an individual piece within that genre. Here are his picks for Chopin's Impromptus.
Among the many recordings of all four Chopin Impromptus, one of my very favorites, and in fact this is the one that I often recommend as a reference version, is the one that Earl Wild recorded to mark his 88th birthday, and it's on our album that's called Recital at Age 88. It's an amazing recital that has Beethoven and Mozart and Balakirev and his transcription of the Mexican hat dance, which is completely demented. But his performances of the Impromptus are very eloquent, very straightforward, very direct, full of color and nuance. And also what's really interesting is when you listen to the Fantaisie-Impromptu, so many pianists love to moon over the trio section, the I'm Always Chasing Rainbows theme, they just turn it into kitsch. And Earl Wild does not sentimentalize that at all. I think the directness of the playing and also his beautiful legato touch with very discreet pedaling amounts to a masterclass. These are very distinctive recordings. Now, for the choice I have for an individual impromptu, I have a choice that's going to surprise you. This is a recording that Claudio Arrau made in, I believe, the late 1970s. These were for his Phillips recordings of the impromptus. And he could be very rhetorical and, even mannered, arguably, in Chopin, especially in recordings from the later part of his career, where he was all about art with a capital A, so to speak. But I find his recording of the F-sharp impromptu, the second impromptu, quite arresting because he takes his time over the piece and he really invests each phrase with a lot of meaning, like he's reading between the lines and not obliterating the lines, but he's really probing this music very much in the way that Maria Callas would shape a Bellini aria or a Donizetti aria, where it's not just about surface display or charm, but it's really getting below the surface of the music. And the trio section with the march rhythm has an urgency and a darkness and a foreboding quality that is unlike any other recording I know. And I'm sure that Arrau would say something about, well, I'm trying to represent the proximity of death, which was a phrase that he used all the time in talking about interpretation. But the nobility of this performance is really quite something unique.
Thanks for listening to the Chopin podcast. If you like what I do, consider supporting my Patreon, where I've been posting surplus interview content with Garrick Olson and some of the other guests who've appeared in this series, including Gabriela Montero and Noam Sivan from episode 8. On the next episode of the Chopin podcast, we'll explore a few of the most important miscellaneous pieces that defy Chopin's traditional genres, the Fantaisie, Berceuse, and Barcarolle, starring Garrick Olson, as always, in a deep and, quite frankly, emotional series of interviews on those singular masterworks. We'll also welcome the gold medalist of the 2015 National Chopin Competition and fourth prize winner at the International Competition that same year, Eric Liu, who will be reacting to two special Barcarolle performances from Warsaw, one his own from 2015, and the other his teacher's, Dong Tai-son, gold medalist of the 1980 Warsaw competition. Stay tuned.